Hello there.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Eric. Ready to go on to round two?
I heard ding. I'm ready, Mom. He's got his boxing gloves on.
All right. I know you wanted to talk about this the last session too, but what can you say about the importance of boundaries? You know, you talk a lot about setting boundaries, not only for yourself, but for others.
He says, "Oh, Mom." He says, "I hope you have some time because boundaries are so important and we need to talk about them." He gets this real like low tone in his voice, this real almost kind of somber. Um, okay, let's start here, he says. He says, let's talk about this foundation, this frequency that he's like playing with, like in his hands, is the title of being an empath. Everybody's an empath. What to what level, to what degree, and what kind of empath is really important to know. And this is huge too with boundaries. He says whether you're a physical empath or a spiritual, emotional sort of empath can play a huge role on what kind of boundaries you need to set.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, you need boundaries. You need boundaries to help you keep a constant sense of self because, again, society, he says, can push you into almost like false, okay, he said false sense of awareness.
Okay.
So having okay, he's funny. He says, so this goes back to what we were just talking about being self-directed. Because if you have your boundaries and you can maintain that constant sense of identity and your ability to be self-directed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let go of those boundaries, you're obviously not as
Yeah,
much self-directed.
that makes sense.
So he says he wants to talk a minute about okay, emotional empaths, and then we'll talk about physical empaths.
Okay.
Um, so he says it's very literal, people. He says if you understand that you're an emotional empath, you're very connected, sometimes over
Hush up,
connected to
Bella.
your own emotions.
Bella's barking.
And
About to bark.
I can hear her
She's
growling.
growling.
Um, and then he says emotions of other situations too then begin to impact you in a way that can really affect your health and your mental stability. So this is where it gets real, Mom. You got to know yourself because then when other emotions are coming in that are not your own, you can identify them and be able to say, hey, these are my boundaries. You know, that's where I draw the line and can't let that affect me in that way. So having emotional boundaries is huge. But he says, I want you people to expand your thinking. He
Hush
says,
up, Bella. It's just the trash men, for the love of God. They come twice a week and she barks every time.
oh,
Like there's going to be something new. Sorry,
that's
guys.
like Benny.
Sorry,
Gosh.
guys. Oh, my God.
He says the emotional boundaries isn't just saying like I'm going to block things out, but also the other way around of kind of what you will embody. And these are, having those boundaries to help you define that is key to maintaining your own personal health. So it's not always about boundaries in the sense of blocking, but boundaries in the sense of building, he says.
What do you mean?
He thinks he's funny when he said that. He's
Keep your day
talking
job.
about, yeah, he's talking about like internal boundaries with self. It has nothing to do with anybody outside or anything external. It's having your own boundaries because, Mom, people are sometimes way overly connected to their emotions and that runs their life. And other
Oh.
times it's the complete opposite. People are ice queens. And he's going, he's pointing at me.
No.
Sometimes I like to try to like cut away from like block off my emotions like so that I don't get all emotional, I guess. But so he's saying that you have to have boundaries with yourself that have nothing to do with anything external because if you don't define that within yourself, then your internal structure is easily affected by external things. Um, then, okay. So then again, he goes back to, he says it's really important to be able to identify when emotions that you are experiencing are not your own. And this is the importance of building internal structure, Mom, internal boundaries for self. And then external boundaries, then when you experience emotions and even process them that are not your own, like for example, some people were extremely affected by the events in Orlando, and they had,
Yeah.
a whole week where they were just depressed and crying. And so you have to be able to, you can relate emotionally to that experience, but then when you internalize it, you have to be able to say, this is not my own,
Yeah.
and draw those lines there. Then he wants to go over and talk about too, because I don't think people know this, Mom. He said physical empaths are just as affected by not having boundaries as the other. He says, because again, if you're, you're sitting at a barbecue in the backyard next to your brother who just had knee surgery, then all of a sudden your knee starts hurting and you're not sure why. Knowing, like, just even understanding the concept of physical empaths is huge and can really improve your life.
Save a
So,
lot of doctor bills too.
no kidding. He says, so again, understanding that that experience is not, okay, that is not your own, then you can put those boundaries up and release that. So, just a real quick example. My sister came in town last summer to my mom's. She's only like 16 months older than me.
Mm-hmm.
She has crepitus in her knees, and they're nasty. She's got like really
Mm.
old people knees.
Oh.
They're horrible. And I kept telling my mom, I said, I don't understand. My knees are aching so bad. This is not
Ah.
me. And I knew it was such a quick onset, and I was like, this isn't me.
Wow.
I wonder where this is coming from. So I asked my mom, I asked my dad, and then I asked my sister, and she was like, oh yeah, honey, I have horrible knees and they freaking hurt all the time. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I had to like kind of put up those boundaries and like
Yeah.
sort of redefine them. So Erik is saying that for you guys too.
Did it work? Your knee pain went away?
It did, because it's like when you, because initially I knew it wasn't me. So that's why I started asking my family members, like, is it you? Like, who's got the knee issues here? Because it sucks. And then I just had to redefine my boundaries so that I wouldn't take that on. And I did. I was able to kind of release that. And but I think it's just being so connected to all that is. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to disconnect and have those boundaries in place,
Yeah.
Mom, Erik says, in order to have to live the best life possible. So he says, but if you, ooh, he
What?
said, he kind of squished up his nose and he said, but it's kind of sick too, because some people think that's a gift. Like, it's definitely an ability, but some people want that connectedness and want to feel other people's garbage, he says,
Oh God.
to think and say, oh, it's ego, Mom. He says, but they say, oh, I can feel what you're feeling
Yeah.
because, I'm an empath. But he says, it's not going to do you any good to be able to feel that. It serves no purpose to you because it's not your journey or your experience.
I've had a
So
lot of. Oh, go ahead.
oh, he was just going to say, having those boundaries, once again, internal and external, is going to be key to understanding your surroundings, Mom, your environment, and the way that it plays on you, he says. And having that internal structure is huge, because when you define that to yourself, you're going to maintain a more constant self-awareness, a truer self-awareness, he says, having these boundaries. So, and just remember, people, he's being a real smart aleck. Boundaries doesn't mean blocking all the time. He says it's more of a defining things to yourself.
Yeah, maybe filtering them. This is yours. This is mine. This is his. This is
Mm-hmm.
mine. Well, I've had experiences where I've been around what I just call energy vampires. Like my sister Denise, God rest her soul, she was not negative or anything. I mean, she was very ill. She had really bad diabetes. But for some reason, even before she had diabetes, she exhausted me. I just felt like so drained. What's that all about? Of course, we know there are
Yeah.
negative people that will just totally make you feel down, and But yeah.
He has explained this concept to me a lot of times, and I'm so grateful because the understanding has changed the whole way that I channel.
Mm.
So he says, okay, he says, I want all of you, including you, Mom, to think about the fact that you all can be and are a conduit for energy to flow to and through. Now, take that thought for a minute. If you have like a negative charge, um, it's going to drain the life out of you, basically a lower vibrational being.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how he explained it to me. When I talk to Erik, I feel rejuvenated. When I talk to, some clients, I feel like it sucks the life out of me. And
Mm.
I said, Erik, I don't get it. And he
God.
said, well, spirit is the positive charge. You're the conduit. If the client doesn't validate, then there's no ground because they act as a ground for
Mm-hmm.
the flow of energy. So same goes for, like energy vampires. He's like, there's no real ground. It's just like a constant draw. You're the conduit and they're like the negative
Mm-hmm.
pull. So, but there's no ground. Therefore leaving you feel like complete shit. He says,
So, like,
feel like you,
what should Denise have? How could she have been aground? And give me an example of what that looks like.
that's a good question because he says a lot of people don't even realize that they do it and it's not intentional. Some people are, they are intentional when they do it. But, he says it's an awareness of the vibration, and then he just said like off to the side vibrational shift. So he says, Mom, there's all sorts of things that can affect it. If they're a drinker, if they're a smoker, if they're just naturally a cynical, soured person, or a cynical disposition, or just a lower vibrational being, that's just going to be the nature of who they are. And
No, she
sometimes
was
that's
really
their
cheerful. She was cheerful in spite of how ill she was, which was it was kind of strange. But she seemed so happy.
And it could be, he says too, the illness. I know for me,
And
like I
maybe.
have one person in my life that's like this. And she's the same way. She can be really chipper sometimes, but I'm like, God, I leave and I'm like, oh, I feel like crap.
So maybe it's the
But
illness. Yeah.
yeah, but just the lower, he says, you got to think about the health. Oh, duh. He's like, hello, Kim. So I guess that's why he was talking about like drinking and smoking and how that
Yeah.
affects your health
Hmm.
because it pulls your energy down or your vibration rather. So if they're in ill health too, that's another reason why it's just going to pull on you like that. So for her to act as a ground, he says that's not really the question. The question is how can I have boundaries so that that doesn't happen? Um, he says, well, you start there, Mom, being able to identify it, being able to say, when I'm around this person, and if you can identify it, then you can sort of just shield yourself.
Hmm.
He says, Mom, this is no new topic for me and you. We talk about shielding.
Oh yeah.
And he says, being able to shield yourself and have that, um, keeping that like in the forefront of your thoughts when you're around that person.
Hmm.
He's like mindfulness, being mindful about it. You'll have a better experience.
Yeah.
It's hard though. I can say that, with my experience, it's hard because even though I can be mindful and say, I'm going to, block my energy, shield it, whatever, it's still like a constant effort when you're with those
Yeah.
people.
Of course.
So,
So say hi to Denise. Do you ever hang out with her still, Erik? She was the first one to greet you when you crossed over.
he took a bow and he's going like this. He's not saying anything at the moment. So he's saying this is yes, like we're together. So
Hmm.
that's my symbol. And he took a bow to show, I guess, humility or his humble attitude towards her,
Mm.
like gratitude. Okay, he corrected me and said gratitude. So he says, yeah, Mom, we hang out not constantly,
No.
but we see each other a lot.
Oh, good.
He wanted to say and touch on. He says, I want you to think about, that's funny, just because you're a doctor. I'm sure you probably, I don't know, but he says, I want you to think about if you walk through a hospital, um, and having boundaries walking through a hospital, because generally you go there if something's wrong or
Mm.
hurting. He says you're not usually in perfect health when you're there. So when you walk through a place where there can be so many ill people or
Yeah.
lower vibration, think about how that too can pull from you and affect your energy. So again,
Just shield yourself. Uh-oh. I lost you. Well, I think this is really good to end off on.